Fires rage either side of the Thames. The fuel, weeks of drought. The ignition, the hottest English day on record. The accelerant, strong southerly winds. The ingredients of a major incident which London officials declared this afternoon with a series of wildfires in Essex, Kent and Surrey. A grass fire in Wennington driven by those winds towards nearby housing. It quickly engulfed sheds, then outbuildings and several homes.
The flames were coming towards me up Church Lane, so I've ran as fast as I could with the flames behind me. I've got to the end of Church Lane, you have to go left or right. I realised then the fields either side were on fire.
London Fire Brigade has had more than 100 firefighters and 15 appliances on the scene since 1 this afternoon at Wennington alone. And remember, this isn't weather that happened, it was caused by human pollution. Unless we respond, there will be more of this and more often. That is science, not politics.
Because of the unprecedented heat that we're currently facing, all of the emergency services are currently under significant pressure and answering a number of 999 calls. The London Fire Brigade in particular is dealing with a number of large-scale incidents spread right across the capital and assisting partners in the home counties as well.
Major incidents also declared by fire services in Humberside and Leicestershire because of the high number of 999 calls. This was Blidworth, Nottinghamshire, another major incident. The fire service said it was a significant forest fire, at least 75 firefighters deployed. South of London, near Croydon, another of the scores of fires now burning. London Euston Station shut down by this line-side fire.
My dad's gonna get through.
The road network affected too. This was the A2 southbound near the orbital M25 this afternoon. Harrow, northwest London, the threat to houses and property here obvious enough. The threat realised. This Elmwood Avenue in Harrow. Charlwood, Surrey, the first place to set a new high temperature record for England today. By late afternoon, at least 29 places from West Yorkshire to Surrey had exceeded the previous record set 3 years ago in Cambridge. Coningsby, Lincolnshire, the hottest so far with a provisional reading 40.3 Celsius. No, said Cambridgeshire Police, the A14 hasn't become a skate park. It's buckled in the heat and partially shut. No services out of London King's Cross today. The main line from Edinburgh to London shut down. Yesterday, track in East Anglia heated to 62 Celsius. The danger is buckling tracks causing derailment. There were few services running on Avanti West Coast, East Midlands and Great Northern as well. Globally, hotter countries pre-stress rails to withstand higher temperatures. To do that here would require a massive shutdown and far greater disruption than closing services 1 or 2 days a year. Tough choices either way. All trains stopped at Birmingham New Street after power lines came down. People trapped in darkness and extreme heat for over an hour before being led through the tunnel to safety.
At the moment we think the overhead wires have come down behind us.
Yeah, we did.
Palm Springs? Well, no, Peterborough. A care home designed with climate change in mind, and they don't just mean the horticulture.
We're so lucky to have a beautiful new building with air conditioning in almost all of the areas, including our lounges and our bistro. We are also making sure that we have hydration stations around the home, offering ice creams and lollies in the afternoon and making sure everyone has plenty to drink.
But we can't air condition our way out of catastrophe. We can accelerate our abandonment of polluting fossil fuels. So a timely announcement today, 8 gigawatts of fixed offshore wind projects which could generate renewable power for more than 7 million homes, given the green light by the government to move to the next stage. They'll be built in the North and Irish seas. Speaking of which, dawn this morning at Saltburn by the Sea in North Yorkshire.
So hot, I couldn't sleep, so we decided to come watch the sunrise and go in the sea.
It's just nice to have some nice weather, I think.
Except this seaside idyll is, of course, evidence of a polluted planet on course for disaster unless we act faster than we are.
Well, 100 firefighters were sent to tackle that huge fire in East London you just saw in Alex's report, which has set buildings and fields on fire near the village of Wennington, where Serena Barker-Singh is there for us tonight. Serena.
Well, Fatima, it's been a dramatic day here for the residents of Wennington, just in Greater London. And it's been declared now a major incident, and it's not hard to see why. I mean, there is latent fog still in the air, there's smoke billowing from behind me, but I'm a little way off. Actually, you can see the full scale of this from the aerial pictures. There's lots of buildings completely engulfed in flames, many homes, and residents of those homes that I've been speaking to today say that they left with almost none of their belongings. One woman was really upset that I spoke to. She said she was worried her pets were still in the area. And as you say, to get a full sense of scale, there has been 100 firefighters at this fire alone. That's about 15 fire engines. And they've been battling with these flames all day. They've been here for about 1 o'clock and the fire is still not yet contained. Thankfully, there's been no fatalities, but residents are really bearing the brunt of this. Some I've been speaking to today don't even know if they've got homes to go back to.
My doormat was on fire, and then from the doormat, then the grass, and then the fence.
So how quickly did it spread?
It was really quick. It happened within less than a minute.
I saw a very small flame. By the time 2 minutes later, I sort of ran round, and the house had just caught light. It just went up, and then about 5 minutes later, both houses up, and it just looked like nothing could stop it.
Serena, what do we know about the cause of the fire?
We don't know a lot as of yet. We know it was a grass fire that spread quickly onto buildings, very quickly. From the residents here's descriptions of what really happened. But there's a fire investigation team that will swoop in later tonight once the fire has been contained. But I mean, it's been the hottest day of the year here. As I'm speaking to you now, Fatima, it's about 38 degrees still. And the residents say that they've never seen these kinds of temperatures, and they've also never seen these extreme fires before either.
Thanks, Serena. Stay safe. Kathy.
Thanks, Fatima. Well, a short while ago, I spoke to the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, and I began by asking him just how dangerous things are in the capital and beyond right now.
As I speak to you, there are 12 major fires across our city. Some of these fires require 35 engines, some require 20 engines, some require 10 engines. And basically, the pressure on the fire service as a direct consequence of the heat wave and some of the fires being generated and spreading means we're asking those in our city not to create more work for the fire service inadvertently by having barbecues in their back garden, in parks and their balconies, by dropping a cigarette, that leads to fire starting, by having bottles in a park that can lead to the rays being magnified. As I speak to you, we also can't rely upon any assistance from fire services outside of London, what we call mutual aid, because all 10 of those themselves have serious issues there. So it's really important. We're fully cognizant of the consequences of the heat wave today and the pressures on the fire brigade.
So how hard is it going to be to bring this under control? And can you just describe some of the conditions for firefighters trying to curb these blazes?
So we have assistant commissioners on site in the west of London in some of the fires, and in the east of London in some of the fires, literally moving some of the engines from a fire, if it's possible to do so, to another fire. On a normal day, the London Fire Brigade receives between 300 and 350 calls. Today, since midday, we've received more than 1,600. That gives you an idea of the pressure that we're under. On a normal day, a fire engine will reach a fire within 6 minutes, a second fire engine within 8 minutes. As I speak to you, on average, it's taking more than 20 minutes for the first fire engine to reach a fire. That gives you an idea of the sort of pressure our firefighters are under.
Given that you can't expect any assistance from fire services around the capital, are you asking the government for more help? What more can be done?
Well, at this stage, there's not a lot the government can do in relation to the next few minutes and hours, but we can do something. So we've got to minimise the chances of inadvertently creating more work for the fire service. I mean, it's not easy for me to say this, but I'm saying this and I mean it. No barbecues tonight. Even in your back garden, forget the park and the balconies, no barbecues tonight, because the heat there is in our city, the dryness of the grass means a fire can spread very quickly after being started very quickly as well. I know it's tempting when you're really hot to jump into the Thames, to jump into the canal, to jump into waterways. Don't. The other thing I'm well aware of, according to the advice from the Met Office, over the next couple of days, we could have excessive rainfall leading to flash flooding, and the fire service will be called into action when it comes to flash flooding. That gives you an idea of the consequences of climate change. This isn't just an issue for sub-Saharan Africa and an island in the Pacific for 20 years' time. This is an issue for us now. The idea of having targets for 2050, 2060, 2070 is ridiculous when literally we have a fire service that has declared a major incident because of fires caused and exacerbated because of the consequences of climate change.
The Minister for London says it's important not to instill panic and stoke fear. Aren't you doing that?
Look, I've just come off the call, off the phone with the fire commissioner. He is somebody who's an experienced firefighter. He's somebody who, put out fires during the riots in 2011. He's the firefighter who took control on that awful night in Grenfell in North Kensington. He is telling me that he's really worried about the consequences of further fires on our fire service. And my job as the mayor is to make sure Londoners are well aware of the pressures we are under. My concern about what you just said from the Minister of London is that epitomises the approach of this government and those candidates still aspiring to be the Prime Minister. They have their head in the sands when it comes to the consequences of climate change. They're kicking the can down the road rather than dealing with the symptoms and also dealing with the causes.
Sadiq Khan, thanks very much.
Stay safe.
Well, our chief correspondent Alex Thompson joins us tonight from a very quiet train station in Peterborough. Alex.
Quiet indeed. Peterborough Station, of course, on the key transport artery, the main LNER railway line from Edinburgh to London. You won't get a train out of here until the 3:41 service, Peterborough to London, tomorrow morning. And there'll probably be some spaces on that one, I would imagine. Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, saying today, we need to think in terms of decades to put a railway system put in place, of course, by the Victorians and make it resilient for what we now face. And what we now face is, of course, days of frost, right through to days like today. The science, and it is science, it is not politics, says we will get more days like today, more frequently, and temperatures, they say, are only going one way. So how does the new incumbent Prime Minister, how does she build into the in-tray the urgency to deal with that question, making the railways resilient? Grant Shapps said decades too to make our road system equally resilient. How do they deal with those questions? But more immediately, and we've seen this today, how do they deal with people losing potentially their lives and certainly their homes from the wildfires? We've seen these images on television now for years, from Australia, from southwestern United States, from Western Europe in the last few days, of people losing their homes to climate change, caused, the science says, in good measure by the pollution we as humans have put into the atmosphere. That was the question that we saw today. That was the reality we saw today. Not in Australia, not in southwestern United States, but in Greater London. Back to you.
Thanks, Alex. Well, our weather presenter Liam Dutton is out in Regent's Park in central London for us tonight. Liam, first of all, take us through the records that have been broken today.
Well, Fatima, a number of records have been broken in this extreme and unprecedented heat across the UK. The most significant of those, of course, is the all-time maximum temperature record. It previously stood at 38.7. Today we got to 40.3 Celsius in Lincolnshire. And of course, that's also the first time in the UK we've had a temperature above 40 degrees. Now, there were a number of other records that were broken. We had the hottest night ever last night. Scotland today had its hottest day on record, and Wales had its hottest day on record yesterday. And what's been really remarkable about these records is that they've not just been broken by fractions of a degree, but by a few degrees. And that's only expected to continue as climate change goes on.
So, Liam, how often can we expect temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius in the future?
Well, interestingly, the Met Office carried out a study a few years ago looking at the chances of 40 degrees Celsius here in the UK, and it found that it's virtually impossible to get 40 degrees if there was no climate change. With climate change, it's now possible, as we've seen today. And if we don't curb our greenhouse gas emissions, based on a medium emission scenario, by 2100 we could see 40 degrees Celsius every 15 years. And in a high emissions scenario, that could be every 3 to 4 years. So it really hits home the importance of bringing down our greenhouse gas emissions, as soon as possible.
And the question everyone wants the answer to tonight, when is it going to cool down?
Well, thankfully today is the last day of the extreme heat. Tomorrow for most of us will be 10 to 15 degrees cooler. There will be some showers and thunderstorms with a risk of some localised flooding. A full weather forecast, of course, at the end of the programme.
Thanks, Liam. Well, this heatwave has affected a swathe of England with record temperatures across the east of the country. South Yorkshire and Humberside Fire and Rescue have both declared major incidents, while thousands of people across Yorkshire, Lincolnshire and the North East have been left without power after equipment overheated. Earlier today, I was out and about finding out how people in West Yorkshire have been trying to cope.
Moorlands are more often associated with stormy romances than tropical temperatures. Not today, though. This is Emily Moore Transmission Station in West Yorkshire. Overnight, the mercury hit 25.9 degrees.
And now we're bracing for a day of heat ahead.
These heat waves becoming more frequent, a clear danger for wildlife. Some species may no longer survive here. The humans, meanwhile, sought solace by the fridges of a nearby farm shop. 6 generations of Ros Parker's family have run the farm. When she turned the pigsty into a cafe and shop, she rather wisely insisted on air conditioning.
Well, we've got air conditioning at both sides, so we can keep the doors shut and keep everybody cool and happy.
What about the kitchen?
Well, follow me. This is the kitchen. This is Mary. Mary, are you coping?
Hiya. How's it going? Okay, a bit warmer here for sure.
Yeah, we've got all the extractor fans that's taking all the heat up. Yeah. So we're still able to work in these conditions.
It's not too bad, actually.
No,
Yeah.
it's manageable. Yeah. Can you feel the heat now?
I can, yes.
So these are all our motors, which, look at that.
This is what's keeping
If that was inside, you'd never be able to work.
Not all food establishments have been so fortunate. This bar in Leeds had to close their kitchen down.
The kitchen got to about 46 yesterday. Not safe at all. We'd much rather everyone's a bit more safer and can basically stay somewhere that's nice, well ventilated.
Are you going to be losing lots of money without being able to serve food today?
Yeah, we'll probably lose roughly about £1.5 to £2 grand, but I would much rather that than the possibility of staff having heat stroke or feeling unwell. It's not worth it.
Over at the station, no trains are heading south. The East Coast main line shut down because of the risk of rails buckling. And a murder trial at the Crown Court was postponed because of high temperatures. Yet some did manage to make play while the sun shines. Huddersfield town centre was in a Mediterranean mood.
I think it's quite nice, it's something different.
Makes a change.
Yeah. It's better than the rain that we usually get.
Grew up in Asia, obviously.
Yeah.
It's just so much different. I can hack the heat there, but here it's just so much different.
What's the main difference here?
I don't know. There's no wind.
It's normally a bit cold and rainy and mediocre weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely enjoying it.
Are you thinking much about climate change when it's this hot?
Yeah, a little bit.
What are you thinking?
All the cars on the roads, all the trucks.
Those still having to work in the searing heat, a little bit less cheerful. Trade unions are calling for a maximum working temperature to be introduced in the UK, like they do in Spain.
Are you feeling okay, though?
Yes, very sweaty. But we're managing, so we'll get through.
Yeah. How about you, sir? How are you feeling?
Had enough.
All right, well, get some water, won't you?
We're hydrated, thank you very much.
All right.
Cheers.
And don't forget, water companies are asking people to be careful with their usage to avoid shortages later in the summer.
Fatima Manji reporting there. Well, from pressures on ambulance services to overheated operating theatres, how has the NHS been coping with the high temperatures and increased demand? Our health and social care editor, Victoria MacDonald, is in the newsroom. Victoria.
Well, it would seem that, Kathy, that the NHS has coped admirably well, although, as you say, under extreme pressure, and it has been very busy. And one of the issues that has been thrown into, you could say, stark relief by this weather is the NHS's infrastructure, old buildings which are hard to cool down. Now, we were shown a temperature reading from inside a maternity operating theatre today, and that was above 36 degrees. Imagine being the staff and the woman giving birth in that heat. One of the concerns too has been about ambulance handover times. In recent weeks, these have sometimes taken hours. The NHS England asked trusts and ambulances to work together to avoid this, and today I spoke to the London Ambulance Service's chief paramedic about how it was working.
In these temperatures, when you arrive at hospital and the vehicle's not moving anymore, it heats up quite quickly. So we are seeing patients being able to move into the hospitals. We're working together as a group of clinicians to keep our patients safe between us.
The handover times have been fine then?
So we've still got handover delays, but we are seeing system working between us, and we're monitoring those conditions of those patients to make sure that we move people as quickly as possible into the hospital.
Now, the patients themselves, we've been told to look out for the elderly and young children who do find it much more difficult to regulate their heat, but there are others who are vulnerable in this heat. Sickle cell patients, well, we've been told there's been an increase in admissions because they need hydration to stop their blood cells sticking. And there are some psychiatric conditions, schizophrenia, for instance. It can be difficult for them to know when they are too hot, and equally some bipolar conditions can be affected. And then there is the general heat stroke. Lots of ambulance call-outs for fainting and dizziness. I spoke to Aaron Wright, a paramedic with the London Ambulance Service, and he sent us this little video a little while ago.
So we just went to a lady who'd had a collapse in the street after not drinking any water at all this morning. She said she was quite busy with work and it kind of slipped her mind, unfortunately. So we gave her a quick assessment on the pavement, made sure that she was okay, got her into the air-conditioned ambulance nice and quickly. Luckily she was fine and didn't want to come to hospital with us, so we've left her be. So I guess the moral of the story is make sure that you're keeping hydrated.
So a flavour of what's happening out there, and even though the temperatures we hope are going to fall, the NHS remains on high alert, with the impact still likely to be felt over the next few days.
Victoria, thanks very much.